This story is called The Class from Hell. I was at Iowa and I was a TA, and kind of the lowest level in the English department was if you were a graduate student, they would give you stuff to teach, and kind of the lowest level of this kind of teaching was you'd work for the rhetoric department and teach a class that was called rhetoric. All the kids at Iowa had to take this class called rhetoric, and I had taught at one time. You taught like speech and writing, and uh, at the second semester I was there, the people that ran that program, came to me and they said, would I teach this kind of unusual rhetoric class? And it turned out it was a class for everybody in the class. All the kids had flunked it the first time. And it was pretty much, it wasn't really that they had like intellectual deficits. It was sort of emotional problems. And it turned out the woman who had previously taught it, uh, she had some kind of meltdown or something anyway, and she was absolutely refusing to ever teach it again. And they thought, well, maybe I could teach it. And the reason was, they said, because I'm so flexible. You're flexible. And I thought, well, you know, okay, I'll give it a try. Life's an adventure. So I had a lot of interesting students. There was one girl named Mary Beth, I remember, and Mary Beth. She seemed like an outgoing, lively kind of person, not the least bit shy. But she told me she was very nervous about giving speeches, and so I gave her some advice about take a deep breath, and think about pleasant thoughts or something like that. And so it was time for her to give a speech, and I was sitting in the back of the room, and I go, Mary Beth, Mary Beth. Time for you, Mary Beth. And she just had her back to me and didn't even move, kind of hunched over. And I go, Mary Beth. And all of a sudden, she kind of turns around and looks at me, and tears are just streaming down her cheeks. And I say, Spike, Spike, why don't you go, Spike? Apparently, she had downed about 3 beers just before class, hoping to calm herself down. That's one of the big problems when people give speeches. Public speaking seems to terrify a lot of people, and she thought maybe she could calm herself down by downing beers. Beers didn't really work out that well. Uh, Spike was a guy. He was called Spike because of his hair. He had a like a mohawk, but it was really high, and it went up in like spikes. Sometimes they were colored green. Spike. His Spike had a best friend named Fat Toby. That's exactly what he wanted to be called, Fat Toby. And he had to do a how to speech, how to do something speech, and all of a sudden he's hauling a hose out of a sack and stuffing it down his throat, and he opens up a beer, and it was a beer bong. I had never seen a beer bong. I had absolutely no idea. I was stunned, watching him, pour a entire beer into a funnel, which went into a hose. And I don't know if you've gone to college kid parties, but apparently beer bongs. He was demonstrating how to do a beer bong for my entire class. My the speech I really remember, though, from that came early in this semester, and they had to do kind of self-introduction speeches, and they were supposed to use an object. And like if you were a baseball player, you might bring in a baseball bat or a baseball or something and say, "This symbolizes me. I'm a baseball player." Well, I had this nice Mormon girl in the class, named I think it was Mary Ann or something like that, and just a sweet, sweet girl. I could not for the life of me figure out how she had ever flunked the course. She was a really nice, pleasant, fairly bright girl, and a kind of maybe a little bit immature, about all I could say. And she got up there, and she pulled out a bear. She had a little teddy bear, and she said, "This is Bobo, and Bobo is my object. I love Bobo, and I got Bobo ever since I was just a little girl. I sleep with Bobo. I just love Bobo." and sweet, I guess you would have to say. And there was another guy in the class that we called Goth Boy. Goth Boy. I don't know if you remember goths, but they would wear all black clothes and sometimes eyeliner and listen to depressing music and things like that. And he did not seem to like this whole speech about Bobo the bear at all. And he went the next class period. He had to introduce himself, and he comes up there with a big paper sack, which he just throws onto the teacher's desk in front of him, and he looks at us and he says, "Who am I? I'll tell you who I'm not. I'll tell you what I'm not. I'm not sentimental. You want to know what sentimental is? I'll show you sentimental." He reaches into the sack and he pulls out a teddy bear, and it looks a lot like Bobo. He goes, this is sentimental. You want to see what I do to sentimental? And he reached back into the sack, pulled out a butcher knife, and he slowly skewered Bobo. And poor Mormon girl was like, oh my God, this is what I do to sentimental. But I gotta admit, that's one of the few introduction speeches I've remembered all these years. How to use props to make a point.